Okay everyone, so we're going to do a quick lesson on how to grid your paper. So first of all, you're going to want to select a ruler that includes inch measurements because this paper is 9 inches by 12 inches. So please select a ruler that has inches. Also, you're going to want a pencil. I recommend using a mechanical pencil for this because you want to have a nice, light, erasable grid. I'm going to do this a little darker than you should just so you can see it. Most rulers don't have 0 at the very edge. Make sure to find where the 0 marker is for your particular ruler. You can see this one, the 0 is here. So, most important thing when you are making a grid is you need to measure twice, okay? Everyone who makes mistakes with grids only measures once. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the 9 is there. Most important step, measuring a second time. Also very important, I'm measuring from the same edge both times. I didn't flip my ruler around and start measuring this way. You want to keep it in the same direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now you're going to take your handy dandy ruler and carefully connect these two dots together to form a nice straight line. Voila, easy as that. Now, like I said, you're going to want to make these lines very light so that you can erase them later. I'm making these a little bit darker. Now, if you make a mistake, if you don't line it up just right, make sure you erase it. The more accurate your grid is, the more accurate it can help you to be in your final drawing. Here we go. Getting close. Now, while I have my ruler in this orientation, I want to line up the 0 on this edge now and measure my lines going the other direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And it actually doesn't quite reach 12 on the very edge there. So be mindful of that. Apologies, that was kind of off the screen there. All right, now 1 through 11 on this side. Measuring from the same side again. Also making sure my ruler is nice and parallel with the edge of my paper. If it's like this, my numbers, my measurements are going to be all off. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And once again, I'm going to connect the dots that I have made. If you do this right, it should look like a whole bunch of squares. Very nicely even squares. Okay. So now, once you have your completed grid, it should look like a very nice, even set of squares across the surface of your paper. You should have 9 squares across the short side and 12-ish squares across this side. When we are creating a grid on our photos, we're also going to create a 9 by 12 box grid, and we're going to use an app to do that. That's very simple. I'll show you what to do next. Hi everybody. I'm going to show you an app that's really, really helpful. You're going to want to search for Grid # as we used to call it, or grid hashtag. And then this is what the app looks like. It's this green one. Hit open. And when you get started, this will all be blank. So you just go in and you select whatever photo you want. That one's already gridded too. Oh, I already have the grid set. So anyway, you're going to want to select whatever photo you want, and I will show you how to make the settings just right. Before you select your photo though, you're going to want to make sure your photo is the right aspect ratio. So to do that, this is, here we go. We go to edit in the top right, and you're going to want to go to crop. And when you go to the cropping menu, click the top right button up here, scroll at the bottom, make sure that it's in 3:4 orientation. So 3:4 is the, aspect ratio. That's the aspect ratio that you're going to want for this project to make this grid just right. So if it's not this aspect ratio, make sure that it is. And you want to crop in on your image to be the size that you want it to be. So on this one, I actually zoomed in a little bit to make this image how I wanted it. So once you do that, save that, and then bring that image, whatever image you wanted, into the grid hashtag app. And you're going to want to go to the sliders in the top left. You'll want 12 rows, 9 columns, and a line width of 2 or 3. These sliders change the color of the grid. So if you want a colorful grid of some sort, you can change the colors. You can also turn them black by doing this. And this adjusts the transparency, I think. So I'm trying a black grid now. You can see I have made the grid sort of gray. There, it's black. Oh, this is actually a black grid on top of a white grid. That's interesting. Okay, so to save this image, you can screenshot it, but you would lose a lot of quality. So to save it, you press on your image, you click on it and hold it down, and then you can say save grid and image. When you do that, it's going to play an ad for a few seconds, but you can just ignore that. So click that.
SMS.
Cool. We have an ad.
Social media.
And then skip it. Exit out. And then you have image saved. So you can go back to your photos and you can see, voila, I have this gridded image of Zaha. It has 9 squares across the top and 12 squares going down, which is perfect because this matches the size of the paper we're going to be using. So you can actually keep this image and just work straight from your device, or you can also print it out, or you can do both. So I find this app really helpful, and I hope you do too. Okay, so I'm going to show everyone a brief explainer of how to do a grid. So here I have used the grid hashtag app to create a grid on my source image. Now, if you want, you could just work from your iPad, your computer, whatever. I wouldn't recommend a phone. Definitely a larger surface is better. Or you can print it out, and printing it out works great too. But please take note that I have made 9 squares across the top and 12 squares going down. So that's my source image there. And basically from here, I have my lightly gridded paper, which is also 9 by 12 squares. And so the proportions are going to be the same as I'm working. Now, what I like to do when I'm starting, sometimes I will actually number my grids. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then going down this way, maybe I'll do like letters instead. For me, I'm just going to do those top ones for now. And then I'm just gonna start from the top. So 1, 2, 3, 4 from the left. I have this little part of this pom-pom. And it's my top box. So I just start here. And what I'm always doing as I'm gridding is I try to further subdivide each box. So I look at, here's the halfway point of this box, here's the 3/4 way point. So this would be the halfway, this would be the 3/4 way, and that's where it crosses the edge. So it's about here. This one, the black part takes up about half of the box. This is slightly to the left of the halfway point. It's kind of a blob in between. Now, obviously, it's just a pom-pom and a hat. It doesn't need to be perfect. So this is a really good way to actually warm up as you're working on your image, is looking at some parts that are not absolutely crucial. Start with the easier parts first, so you start to get the hang of what your image is going to look like. And then you'll be a little bit more ready to tackle some of those trickier parts, like the eye, the nose, the mouth. The features are going to be really important. I'm also, as I go along, I'm checking and seeing, okay, so I just did this box. Now I'm crossing over into this box, so it's just 2 over. And this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes down. So you want to keep track as you're working and make sure that you're staying in the right spot proportionally. It's really easy actually to get a little lost. So here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And over, that's where this cheek is, right here. And that goes from the corner of this box to a little past the middle point here of this box. And that continues up to here and on. So I'm doing this really lightly. I'll show you. Basically, I like to start with the outer edges of my subject and then kind of do sort of the simpler parts first and then tackle the harder areas. So from here, like this eye, obviously, is going to be way more complicated. And when I do that, a lot of times I like to subdivide the box on my paper by doing an X inside of the box. And then if you have your image printed out, you can draw an extra grid on your printed image, or you can just kind of imagine one. So I'm going to keep drawing for a little while, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. I'm going to switch the sides here so it's a little easier to see, hopefully. Okay, so at this point, you're probably going to have a really kind of scary looking drawing, but hopefully it's relatively proportional according to your grid. Now, obviously, this is not what I want my finished piece to look like, but believe it or not, these proportions are actually pretty accurate because I put them where the grid told me to. Now, obviously, I'm going to be doing a lot of fine tuning from here, getting the exact shapes of everything right. But more importantly, The reason why this looks so strange is because there's no value, there's no shading, there's no color. So everything is sort of out of context. So what I would recommend doing at this point is creating an edited version of your piece and changing it to grayscale. So from here, I am a lot more able to see, where did I'm a lot more able to see the values. I don't know where it's saved to, but I'm just gonna keep it here for now. So from here, I'm a lot more able to see the relative lights and darks. I can see that my lightest area is in this fuzz around her hat and here, but the tone of her skin is a bit darker than the hat or the bright areas of the hat. And from here, this is where I'm gonna start to tone my drawing and add in some values. But before I do all that, or sometimes as I'm working, my big job from here is to completely remove my grid. Once I'm happy with how my proportions look, approximately, I need to remove my grid outlines because they're going to really mess up my drawing as I progress further. Doesn't have to be perfect. As you do this, you will probably remove a little bit of your drawing and need to re-correct, but that's okay. So this is a super important step, and this is why I recommended that you work with a really light grid, because if you don't, you're gonna have this permanent grid on your paper and it's just not gonna look right. Oh man, now it looks even crazier. Okay. I'm realizing as I look at my grid, I think I put the mouth a little too low according to this grid line. So I'm gonna raise that a little bit, and I think there's just too much of a gap between the nose and the mouth. So I think I'm gonna lower the nose slightly and raise the mouth slightly. Working with a grid isn't perfect, but it is a really useful tool, and you can kind of figure out any issues as you go along. In the Proko article I shared with you all, it really recommends to not have teeth in your source image because they can look really strange. It's very hard to do teeth well. So I'm just including teeth as a personal artistic challenge. So we will see how that goes. So far, they're a little crazy. Okay, so from here, you're gonna want to use a range of pencils. I just have one with me right now. This is an HB pencil, which is a pretty good light tone to start with. And depending on how you like to work, I like to just start by massing in some values really lightly. Notice I'm not holding my pencil really close to the tip. I'm kind of holding it back further so that I just use barely the weight of the pencil. You can also shade sort of like this. Notice I'm holding it like from the top, and this works well. And you'll notice it starts off looking a little bit too dark. I'm trying to avoid pencil lines. And I'm just trying to establish kind of a base value. I really recommend getting a base value in as soon as you can, because it will really help you see, it will help you pull out the highlights and establish the darker tones right off the bat, which is really, really important for this piece. So I'm just literally kind of going over the whole thing here. And I'm focusing on the face to start with. Be really careful that you get rid of your eraser shavings because they can kind of clog up your drawing. Now you might work a little bit different than this, but this is kind of how I like to get started. Okay, so now I have a base tone. It looks really scary again. And I'm just using a tissue to blend out this value so that it's nice and smooth. I don't recommend just using your fingers for blending because your fingers have natural oils in them and they can create some weird dark patches in your shading and just generally kind of mess up your drawing a little bit. Okay, so now I have a base tone there. Gonna do a very quick base tone on the top of the hat. And this one will be super dark. I'll deal with that later. So from here, I'm continuing to look at my grid and I still can very subtly see my grid here. And I can start to build up the shadows in my drawing. You can also use a blending stump, those little paper, they're also called tortillons. They're really handy for getting a little bit more detailed smudging going on. Oh, I totally forgot to mention, make sure you work on not the super rough side of your paper, but the more smooth side of your paper. I'll be sure to put that in my notes for you all. Because we're mostly working in graphite for these portraits, and it's a little bit tricky to blend your graphite when it's a really rough surface. So from here, all of those features that I was defining as lines before, they weren't actually lines. They were really just shifts in value and changes in tone. So it's important to render them as value because that kind of gives them more of a clear context of what they actually are. As you get into your darker values, make sure you switch to a darker pencil. I'm just starting to lay in kind of my light tones here and getting a little bit of shading down. But when I get into my darker values, like in the eyes and things like that, I'm gonna want to switch to a much darker pencil, like a 6B or an 8B, and I wanna make sure it's nice and sharp. So I'm trying to stop myself from using this pencil too much for the darker areas. And if your shading looks a little too intense, you can always smudge it out, erase it away, and just slowly kind of build up those values as you go along. And slowly but surely, your piece will start to come together. So I hope this was helpful. This is just the beginnings of this portrait, and you can kind of follow along with your own progress, and good luck with your own portraits, everybody. Thanks.